Alright, DevLog 001. Ideally, nothing bad's happened. We are going to try and see if this works out. The idea is that I'm going to explain my code over this thing, and you're going to see me lose my absolute mind. Because Unreal is weird like that, isn't it? So, in a simple term, the code works in mysterious ways. No, that's not enough. It needs to be concise. Right now, let's start with something this simple, like what's new. Oh god, even it. Meh, we'll leave that later. Let's start and organize some of this, and with that organization, maybe you'll be able to see what it is that we are actually dealing with, right? Why did I open Wolf New? That's a very good question. Next question. So this started out as a top-down blueprint because people need to use the blueprints. There's nothing wrong with blueprints. If anything, it speeds up your thing. Main player is a player controller. Why is there a control? I'm gonna kill you this. Okay, we will fix that in post. Now, this is the main player, and like you might be wondering, wow, this is ugly. Oh god, you have no idea. Let's start by figuring out. Now the idea of the code is simple. You have a main player, and that player gives interference, gives data to the rest of them. For example, if you hit select, which is essentially clicking the thing, it'll branch into checking if the creature can move or not, or if the creature can attack or not. And if the creature can move, then it'll set the move to click. It'll go to click to move, which is even weirder. It'll get so. I am throwing myself off a lot. There's a lot of things that I need to throw out here. So let's start with something simple. Let me tell you about the grid. DevLog 001 should be the grid, right? Yeah, so let's start with that. If I can find it, I put the grid to my 90% like easier. Oh, there we go. I followed a tutorial on YouTube that helped me set up this grid so that it's all the work is done in post processing rather than in the after processing. So when you compile the thing, it shouldn't have a lot of lag. And that the magic of that happens in the construction script. If you notice that it has so there are a bunch of things. There's a great get material instance, etc., etc. What it essentially does is we set the line. We go to a function known as Creatan, where there is a lot of math involved, and I mean a lot of math involved to make what essentially is two arrays. One array having all the vertices and one array having all the triangles. Using said array, we are gonna create a mesh section and set the material. Now, why would you do this? Why would you run this entire grid? Because since we are doing that, this grid is essentially a global variable in every level. Accessing the game mode in every level. For example, if I wanted here, I can access. Wait, where the hell is it? In event begin free, I can cast to top-down game mode and essentially get the grid and set the grid as a variable. Use that grid as a variable for the entire thing and call it a central hub, if you will. Easy enough for us to understand, right? I hope so, because that's the weirdest bit. Now, this grid has a lot of fun functions. For example, we have return tile. If you give a location, this is not right. I'm agree. Given a location, this location or this location, which is essentially this location, it will give you which tile it corresponds to. Return location, the inverse of return tile, where it is given a location, given a tile will give you the center location. Or if you don't want the center location, it will not give you the center location. Essentially, the select runs the entire thing. Set selected tile. This, on the other hand, is the more important bit. So when you run the thing, this is just a test level. Come on, no, don't. You need to run it on the viewport more often. People often run it this way, and I'm like, oh, good job, Trey. When did you end up doing that? Bless you, huh? But essentially, this this weird pastel thing. You can start working on that. That pastel thing is very useful. Next off. Oh god. So that's this function does that. Get object is my favorite function in this because it will give you any collision. So areas or box essentially it moves around the box component and checks for any overlapping situations. If there's overlap, it sets value to true and tells you that hey, there's an object on that tile. If overlap is not true, well, essentially if the overlap is not true, it'll give you that hey, that's an empty tile. This sounds simple. This sounds very simple. This should be easy enough, right? It is, except Unreal hates everybody. Get center will give you the center of any tile. This needs to die. So it'll give you the current probably. And get object TT returns based on tile, which tile, and get object returns based on location. Get tile size will just give you the tile size. Simple enough, right? Cool. Now, while that ended up working out, let's try and figure out the rest of the thing. Now there are like three parts to. I have paint to explain. There are three parts to this game. There is the. Wow, is this what it looks like? Paint's weird. There is the global variable. This is game mode. This has the grid info. If anybody says anything about my handwriting, the ghost of bad handwritings will haunt you too. Not me, you. This gets you to a controller. And this controller gets you to wherever you want to go. Essentially, the controller acts as a hub and we will be using the controller. Now, here's how this will all work. This main player is the controller to this entire thing. In main player, you will see a lot of unprocessed code. A lot of this code is just unprocessed, and because I need to comment it properly. But since I'm probably the only one working with, along with one more person, I'm probably gonna comment it in the end when I understand what I needed to do. But essentially, there are texts. They are connected to multiple buttons on the UI, and use that button to move around and do things. It sounds really vague, and maybe the question is like how much of this I should be explaining to you is the question, right? For DevLog 001, let's go over a brief overview of this. There's a lot of bind function, a lot of functions that is bound to things like archer, sword, movement, all of that is bound to random events. And from there, it'll be like, okay, this is done kind of situation. So that's pretty cool. Ideally, this code will be more neater, but with that, I need to have a game loop set up. To set up a game loop, everything's figured out. Now, the other part, which is absolutely murdering me, is the character behavior. This is for enemy behavior. For some reason, I named the character behavior because I'm a scary cat. It searches for whichever nearest enemy exists, moves to that enemy, and finishes it out. Sounds simple enough? Well, buddy, turns out Unreal's behavior tree runs multiple times. It just keeps on going. So I have to run some interesting blog runarounds around that. This is weird because I'm going to this entire thing blind, right? Like my Unreal knowledge is as good as it is. It's still a non-zero amount of doubt in it. My background is in computer science, so I've been learning Python and anything along those lines. And did you know that Python hates everybody and Unreal also hates everybody? So we have that kind of bond. I'm trying to figure out how to explain a lot of it because there's a lot of explanation. But for devlog number 001, like and subscribe, or don't like and subscribe. We'll see how this goes.